So let's kick off with the social learning theory. The social learning theory was proposed by Albert Bandura. He's a bit of a guru when it comes to cognitive and social psychology, and you may have heard about him when you were doing your uni courses. Albert's theory was that people learn from one another via observation, imitation and modelling. He's famous for his Bobo doll experiment, where he explored how young children, aged 3 to 5 years old, learnt to replicate violent and aggressive behaviours from adult models. Luckily, they were just using a big blow-up doll, but the violence is quite scary. He then replicated these findings with children watching video recordings on TV rather than a live model. If you've got 5 minutes to check out the link, the footage is actually fascinating, but it's scary all at the same time. But what we are interested in is what Bandura formulated from this research. His theory, as I said before, was that people learn from one another via observation, imitation and modelling. And he unpacked this theory further into 4 principles of social learning. The first principle is attention. So Bandura believed that we cannot learn if we are not focused on the task. If we see something as being novel or different in some way, we are more likely to make it the focus of our attention. Social contexts can help to reinforce these perceptions and ignite our attention. The second principle is retention. So Bandura's theory states that we learn by internalising information in our memories. We recall that information later when we are required to respond to a situation that's similar to the situation with which we first learnt that information. And then we move on to the third principle, which is reproduction. So if we're given the opportunity to reproduce that previously learned information, whether that be behaviour or skills or knowledge, then we're more likely to remember it. However, practice through mental and physical rehearsal often improves our responses. So if we're reproducing these behaviours often, then we're going to be more likely to learn and then automatically respond in this way in scenarios. And this would be true for both health learning and movement learning. And then the final principle in his theory is motivation. So his theory states that we need to be motivated to do anything. Often that motivation originates from our observation of someone else being rewarded or punished for something they've done or said. This usually motivates us later to do or avoid doing that same thing. Motivation can also be internal, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in some of our later theories. So they're the 4 principles of the social learning theory. But how can we actually translate that into our work as PD Health PE teachers? So Bandura's theory shows us that social modelling is a very powerful learning tool. If students see positive consequences from a particular type of behaviour, then they're more likely to repeat that behaviour themselves. Conversely, if negative consequences are the result of a behaviour, then they're less likely to perform that behaviour. So let's look at an example from the PD Health PE context. Let's take bullying as an example. If a student witnesses another student being bullied and the bullying behaviour does not result in a negative consequence, then there is a greater likelihood that that student may participate in bullying behaviour themselves down the track. So this could be, for example, a comment that's a bullying comment being ignored by a teacher in the playground. Then there's more likelihood that the student who witnesses that thinks that they may be able to get away with that behaviour as well. This likelihood will be increased if there are positive consequences for the bully. For example, if they are rewarded by other students through increasing social status. And this goes equally for offline and online bullying. So the likelihood of participating in the behaviour would be dramatically reduced if there were negative consequences, such as some sort of punishment from the teacher who witnessed the initial bullying, or some sort of bystander action that's taken, whether it be offline or online. This likelihood further diminishes if the negative consequences are from peers, particularly in the form of exclusion from their group or being challenged in front of their peers. So that's just one example from PD Health PE where consequences can have a real impact on how we behave. And I'm sure you can think of a lot of others where negative and positive peer consequences in particular can increase or decrease the likelihood of a particular behaviour or action. But what are some other implications? So if we look particularly at the theory, imitation, reproduction and reinforcement help the behaviour to stick. So as teachers, if we provide multiple and frequent opportunities for students to imitate a positive behaviour and then practice that behaviour or action or skill in order to promote refinement and to ensure that learning sticks. And if while they're practicing and refining those behaviours or skills, we can include positive reinforcement along the way, both from ourselves as teachers and from their peers, then that's going to further increase the potential for that behaviour or skill to stick. So it's important as we go, as we teach students and as they practice and refine their skills and behaviours, that we reinforce success along the way and we celebrate all progress in order to maintain motivation. And the last part of Bandura's theory that I think links very well to PD Health PE is the idea of maintaining attention and ensuring that students are motivated as they're practicing. And certainly we know that using real-life context in both the health and the movement space are going to capture students' attention more. It makes the learning meaningful and it provides situations that reflect how students are most likely to experience the behaviour, the action or the decision outside of the classroom. And that means that the learning will be more likely to stand out in their memory and therefore be more easily replicated if the student finds themselves in a similar situation.